My name is Dale, and I want to welcome you to my channel, Observer of Anomalous Objects. Today, I'll be bringing on two fellow podcasters and friends. I have an Astral, or Tyler as he's known, and also Cortex Zero will be with us as well. Now, both these guys, what I really respect about them, they've been at this a lot longer than I have, and they are well established on YouTube and on X as well. You can find Astro on X at _Astro. And also at theastro.com. Cortex Zero, Tom Thompson, can be found on X at Cortex_Zero. And his podcast can be found at Anompod. It's Anomalous Podcast. You can also find Tom on YouTube by typing in the words Cortex Zero. Before I bring them on, let me go ahead and tell you what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about remote viewing. I'm so excited. I mean, Astro and Tom both have a lot of experience in that area, but we're also going to be talking about those crazy drone incursions going on over in Europe. And so this is going to be a really, really good discussion. And let me encourage you not to leave early, because one of the things that Tom wants to bring up, and I can't wait to hear it, but we're going to talk about the possible tech of some of these craft. And so make sure you stick around to be able to hear that part. And I mean, this is just going to be a great podcast. I'm so excited. Now, without any further ado, I'm going to bring Astro and Cortex Tom on the program. Here we are.
What's up,
Dale? Voice together. I'm so excited.
Great.
So, how you guys doing today? We
doing well.
What?
I'm not bad. I'm okay.
Oh yeah, I'm good.
9 o'clock where you guys are. So
it's a long day at work, Dale. You know how my life is at this point.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons we moved this back to 9 o'clock, is because of the fact that we didn't know what your work schedule was going to be. And I think the last time I had you on, it was like you were rushing to get here, and I don't think you even had a chance to eat. And so we moved it back a little bit for that.
I appreciate that.
I'm really excited to have you guys here. I mean, Astro, I've heard rumors, I don't know if they're true or not, that maybe you help out Ross a little bit. You've got your Twitter spaces that you're involved with. You've got all the stuff I mentioned before. Really excited to have you on the podcast for the very first time, and to have us all three together. It's just amazing. And then Tom, you've got your Anomalous podcast. You got all these different little films that you've made, like the Men in Black. I mean, I'm telling you what, you guys have done some amazing work. Well, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with remote viewing. And so let me go ahead and ask my first question. How long have you guys, you can each jump in whenever you want. How long have you been remote viewing?
Astral, you're definitely the expert of experts out of my friends on this. So please.
For sure. And it brings it full circle right now too, Dale, because the first podcast that I was on once I got into the UFO topic was Tom's podcast, Tom and Ty, when they were together. So, thanks for bringing me into all this. But for remote viewing, I've probably been working on remote viewing or researching it for about 15 years.
Oh, wow.
So for me, it all started with a personal experience where I had a precognitive dream, and I got robbed basically. And I 3 days later, I ended up having the same experience, and it made me really research into precognition, extrasensory perception. And so I got into really the science of it. And along that way, I learned about clairvoyance or remote viewing. And so I really wanted to understand it, not only from an experiencer perspective of doing remote viewing, of trying it and experiencing it, but like how it's tested and how the data is being collected and how other people can learn about remote viewing. So that became a little bit more of a motivation, not to become a lot of the stuff that I work on is not necessarily to become like this master astral projector or like super remote viewer. It's kind of to set up platforms and to facilitate ways that people can try it into experiencing it, and then to collect data on it that would normally be out there. So it's kind of like I'm want to be more like a Russell Targ than like a Ingo Swan. So I've very much been interested in just the research of remote viewing, and then it's gained a lot of attention, and I think a lot of people are now associating it with the UAP phenomenon. So I like a lot of the relationships and the ways that it's relating to the UAP phenomenon. So that's my main interest in remote viewing.
Well, when I came into this community, I was a nuts and bolts guy. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what I wasn't interested in any of the other stuff. It's amazing how things change so fast, and all of a sudden you realize that the phenomenon seems to be all connected in one way or another. And you made a good point about remote viewing. I had Darcy on, I think it was last week, and we had talked about the psychic phenomenon, and you could also see a lot of the ties there. Tom, how long have you been involved with remote viewing?
So
when did you get started?
So I've been researching it for, along with all of these subjects for most of my life, but I really didn't start experimenting with it and dedicating myself to it until I was actually like in astral spaces, like really going through the proper protocols and trying to take what I had actually learned from like Paul Smith and others, like watching their presentations and such. Now, Astral was there for like my first legitimate remote viewing session, when we had the double blind target during the Thursday stream. And I was in that data set of the beginner's luck phenomenon where like you do really well your first time. And you got to figure, for the people that don't really think there's anything to this, it could be anything, like literally anything. So the mathematical chances of you really getting even somewhat close are very, very slim, because think about how many different combinations of shapes and colors and lines and everything you could imagine visually in your own head. It could be an image of that in that particular envelope. And yet I was able to have success, and then it actually happened over the course of a couple weeks. It happened multiple times. And then what's interesting in Astral, I think you kind of predicted this, there's a drop off. That third time your ego starts to get involved. McGonagall talks about this because you want to try to keep your ego out of it. And that third time, like, you're like, oh dude, last time Astral always compares it to baseball, which I love. It's like, last two times I was up at the plate, I got a hit. I'm feeling myself right now. And then next thing you know, here comes a knuckleball. You know what I mean? Like, you don't know what to do with it. And sometimes you don't have a good result on that third time. So you have to really try to just let the information come in from where it's originating from. And I mean, we could go into a million different explanations as to how it may work and such, but I'll just say in really simple terms. Yeah, well, I think it really all fundamentally just comes down to there being a non-local component to our consciousness. I mean, it's very simple. It's like we're connected to a data stream that is outside of our time-space bubble, for lack of better ways of saying it. And because of that, we basically have an invisible hookup to something that has a better vantage point on reality than ourselves. So it's the difference between someone standing at the base of a mountain and then someone standing at the top. I can see the forest for the trees at the top, and the person at the bottom, they're only going to be able to see to the horizon and their immediate surroundings. They're not going to have that giant vantage point. And that's what I think is going on with this and makes all of this possible.
Wow. Well, let me ask Astro a question right now. Can you explain remote viewing like in simple terms? There may be some people watching that don't have a good idea about what remote viewing is. And just make it, if you can do it, make it as simple as possible for the person that knows nothing about remote viewing.
Yeah, I would say remote viewing is really, if I were to try to make it as simple as possible, is you're trying to perceive or describe a hidden target without using any of your senses. So you're trying to describe something that you don't know anything about without using any of your five senses. So you're using extrasensory perception, and you're trying to describe something in a different location or a different spot. And so that's just the exercise that was developed to test that. And there's a lot of different, if we're talking about psychic phenomenon, which I think, hold on, let me see something real here. Sorry, I'm gonna to switch my camera back. If we're talking about ESP, one of the things that I've noticed, and I think that you see about telepathy is a big thing, a term that you hear that's very popular nowadays is telepathy. But if you look at parapsychology in this in the study of psi, there have been more data collected to confirm it that needs to happen. It's already happened. So when it was developed in Duke University, it was already established through hundreds of thousands of trials that the students were doing. The students at Duke were doing this in the program. And so they were doing very simple tests like Zener cards, which were 5 cards with 5 different shapes on it. And you would have a cardboard slate in front of somebody, and you would basically just shuffle them, hold them up, and try and send which card to the other person mentally. And so that was telepathy. And then the other one was clairvoyance. So you were trying to guess dice. So they were trying to roll dice and trying to guess that and to see what the difference was from chance. So you were comparing everything to chance. And what basically happened was that statistically, there was a threshold that needed to be met of scientific confirmation of these. So it had to be a certain distance away from chance to say, oh, this effect is real, this effect is happening. And so what happened was they collected well above the threshold that science would consider an effect size. And so, but the unfortunate part is, and what's happened recently with the telepathy tapes, is people have taken that information and been able to explain that to the public. If you go through scientific journals and stuff about all of this psi and remote viewing, it's not interesting. It doesn't grab people's attention. But when you turn it into a nice podcast or a documentary that grabs people's attention, they're like, oh man, like this is real. Like this is something I can relate to. And so I think what's happening now and what you're seeing is people are making content about the research that's been done that are grabbing people's attention. And they're starting to realize that like, the research has already been done. It's already established. Telepathy, precognition, and remote viewing have already, to me, been established scientifically. Now we're just trying to figure out, like, how are we going to use it? How are we going to actually use this that can be actually applied to like our everyday life? How can we actually use it? So that's kind of where I think remote viewing's at right now.
Okay. Do you use because obviously there's remote viewing and then there's a controlled remote viewing, CRV.
Right.
Which one do you use, and can you explain what CRV is, controlled remote viewing?
Well, controlled remote viewing is really the most traditional remote viewing. So the way that was developed by Ingo Swann, which is like a very detailed step-by-step process of how you would acquire the information from a given target. There's different protocols. So they goes into what those are called. Oh, my cat's going crazy. Let my cat in. We go through different protocols. So one of the different other protocols that I've been working with lately is associative remote viewing. So if you were going to actually use remote viewing to gamble or to like on something, like say you were betting on sports and using remote viewing, you would have 2 targets. So say the Chiefs were playing the Eagles. One target would represent the Chiefs and one target would represent the Eagles. You would draw out what you thought the target was. So what you think the result of the game was, and that target represents the winner. And so you would draw it out. Then you would say, okay, I have this drawing. Which target does it look closer to? So then whichever one it looks closer to, you would bet on. So you would say, oh, this looks like this target. Oh, this target means it's the Eagles. So I'm going to bet the Eagles. Then over time, you could see whether or not using remote viewing, you've been successful, based off 50-50 or whatever. So people have actually done that through thousands of trials and made like $50,000-$60,000. So, there's precognitive remote viewing as well. There's outbounder remote viewing, which is kind of like out of body experience remote viewing. So there's a lot of different, and there's kind of like other ways that people are using it. But controlled remote viewing is a very traditional way to go through a detailed step-by-step process that was developed by Ingo Swann.
Now, wasn't that the purpose of controlled remote viewing, to make it somewhat scientific, and so you could big old test and evaluate and say we did a protocol, and is that one of the reasons that Ingo wanted to do that?
Well, I think he just wanted to develop a way so that other people who came into the remote viewing program could go through it, because I'm sure everybody kind of goes in to remote viewing and their first question is like, how can I get better? Like, what's the best way to do it? And I think, to me, the answer that you start with is controlled remote viewing, because that's the most detailed way that was developed that was like inside of the Stargate program, all of those programs, that was like, this is the way that all of the professional remote viewers, kind of are trained on. And so I think that's kind of like, it's the foundation of remote viewing, but other people have branched off into other flavors of it.
I got a great follow-up question, and it kind of feeds into one that I had. I like that associate remote viewing. I'm going to have to learn how to do that. Have a little better luck. I don't gamble a lot, but I wouldn't mind having a little better luck because mine hasn't been very good. Now, you mentioned outbounder remote viewing, and that's out of the body. And so how does that differ from astral projection? Is it the same? Is it different?
I get not too much, other than the intention that you would have after you achieved an out-of-body experience would be to go to the target. So it would be like utilizing, if you consider yourself an out-of-body experiencer or sorry, camera keeps messing up, or an astral projector, you could go into actually trying to have an astral projection and then gaining the information through remote viewing that you would get, and then having that information through that. So outbounder remote viewing is essentially just utilizing an out-of-body experience and then acquiring the information, as opposed to just sitting there, and just drawing it out and kind of like getting into maybe a meditative state. You're actually trying to like go to sleep and have an out-of-body experience.
Either one can answer this question. I don't care which. You seem to be more the expert on it. And remote, when we get to the drones, probably rely a little more on Tom, some of his research that direction. So that's one of the reasons I picked these subjects, because I knew each of you had, an expertise in one of them and stuff, but I knew that crossed over, that you both had information and knowledge in that as well. And so what was Project Stargate? I mean, we found the documents coming out of the CIA. They've been released through FOIA, but exactly. And the reason I bring that up is you mentioned Ingo Swann, and we all, and the basic information there is that around 1972, I think it started with NASA, didn't it? And then it eventually evolved in like the CIA got involved. But they got a hold of Stanford Research Institute. And so they started doing this. I guess the initial thing was Uri Geller. And then, the real first remote viewer, though, was Ingo Swann. And they brought him in somewhere around 1972, wasn't it? And stuff. So what was Project Stargate? What was the purpose of it? Was it a single program, or was it an umbrella for a bunch of other programs?
Well, I mean, it started with a lot of earlier programs and program names. And to me, it started kind of like the CIA. The ironic part is the CIA started it and ended it, but the majority of the 20-year program, the DIA, was the one who funded it. And so what I found interesting about the whole remote viewing program was that all the military branches had their own kind of remote viewing program. So at some point, the Army, the Navy, and I'm not sure if the Air Force, I think the Air Force did as well, but all of them had the remote viewing programs, and they were all named different things. And SRI kind of bubbled out from that as the research organization, that was Hal Puthoff and Ingo Swann and those guys, and Russell Targ. So, that it all developed over 20 years. And also, what I think people don't know is a lot of the time is that instead of them just getting a check for like 20 years and being like, here's the remote viewing program, do whatever you want for 20 years. These guys had to prove themselves every single year to be refunded. And so they had to come up with, people, their superiors had to be convinced. And these guys were extremely skeptical about what was happening. So they would come up with and show them, unbelievable type of sessions that would happen so that it would have funding the next year. And they would have to do that year in and year out. So the Stargate program was actually the last, it's what it's basically known by, but it was the last program name for the remote viewing program that it ended under.
Kind of became the umbrella. I mean, I was looking at the names: Scanate, Grill Flame, Center Lane, Sunstreak. Right? Yeah. How in the world would you know, on those names that it had anything to do with remote viewing? And I think you'd have to agree that was on purpose. They were literally trying to hide this program. Now, the reason it was started, didn't it have something to do with a Russian colonel that had defected and had told, when he was debriefed, that they were doing this over in Russia, in the USSR, I guess it was, wasn't Russia technically at that time, that they were doing this. And so we found out that they were doing this, and some of the information he provided, according to Lynn Buchanan, it proved to be accurate. And so he thought, well, if the Soviets can do this, we better be able to do this as well. But my next question is, do you think that Project Stargate, do you think it's in effect today, maybe with a different name and maybe a different agency?
100%. I know it is. Like, I know it is. I've talked, and I can't. I guess after the podcast, I'll reach out to them and see if they can make a post about it, what's allowed to be said. There's somebody in our community that actually knew some of these individuals, like the Ingo Swans and such. And he and I had a really long Zoom call. This was like a little over a year ago, I want to say. And that came up. This is absolutely still in operation. And what's funny is that I think Astral probably knows this very well too, that when they were in the midst of doing it, of course, there were people within the government that were going to sort of poo-poo it and think it was all bunk. So they had to not only maneuver names and projects and reasons for it to keep it secret, but they also had to do it so that they didn't get shut down and piss off like all of their bosses. But then once time went on, it got the proper funding that it needed. They saw results. As much as people may want to debate that, they absolutely saw results. That's when it was shut down. This tends to happen a lot. You'll notice in the world of secret shadows and such, once they realize they have something spectacular like this, but it could also be dangerous if the public figures out that this is an extra human ability per se, that's when they shuffle it off somewhere because they want to keep this away from everybody. This is a heavily suppressed subject, and I know it sounds very like tinfoil hat and like Alex Jonesy to some people, but this is absolutely how this type of thing goes on. We have the documents. Like this is really what they do. They realize that they have a superpower in their hands, and then they're like, "Oh shit, this is actually working. Let's tell everybody that it doesn't seem like it works. It's probably nothing to it. Shut it down, and it's on to the next phase because it's a tactical advantage."
It's like the guy who comes over to buy your car and, oh, look at this. This isn't any good. This isn't any good. I don't know if I want it. But the whole time.
No, that's Tom is, I think, onto something because something that I've recently, kind of learned through talking with a lot of people within the remote viewing program or kind of like deep into it. Cause I've been at the Psy games and developing and working with a lot of these people. What I've kind of learned was that part of the reason why the remote viewing is, just in my opinion, through what I've, kind of learned and through conversation, is that part of the reason why the remote viewing program ended was because there's no.
Your mic went out, Astro, or you went on mute.
Sorry, yeah. So if there's no way, the reason why the remote viewing program ended in part was because there's no way to block remote viewing.
Right.
And so if more people know about remote viewing and the public starts trying remote viewing, that there's no way to actually prevent remote viewing from happening to something, And so I think to just stop it, you would stop the program altogether. And to say, okay, the remote viewing isn't anything. This wasn't, legitimate. It's not something that we want, but still being worked on and developed. So, and I think, and Tom, maybe you could, would like to get your thoughts on this too. I think it kind of also developed into some sort of psionic program.
Yeah.
something psionic.
I want to get to that in a
100%.
minute, so let's just hold on to psionic.
Yeah, we can save it
Yeah.
for that. Definitely. I have a lot I can say about
This,
that.
this is really intertwining with a couple other questions. Maybe we should do that one first, but remind me to get back to the Paul Smith question about NHI possibly suppressing psychic gifts. But let's go ahead and ask that first question. What is psionics? I mean, that's a new term. A lot of people, I mean, it just started coming out, within the last year, people really talking about it anyway. So what exactly is psionics? How would we explain that?
Well, the way that I've interpreted it, and maybe Astral, it's possible that it could be different for you. It seems to really specifically mean, like, when you have a psionic asset, it is an individual that is able to create essentially a telepathic bridge between themselves and something else. It's not specifically like, because you have telekinesis, pyrokinesis, psychokinesis, all of these different terms, but they all do mean something different. But every time they talk about their work, Barber and the others that are out there doing these types of things, it sounds like they are making mind-to-mind connection between themselves and, like, as crazy as it all sounds, a craft, NHI, etc. So it's like it's a hired gun. It's like a hired telepathic gun to establish maybe some type of communication with whatever is floating around out here.
Yeah, I find it interesting. I know Billy Myers is a very controversial person, but I've had Red Elders on a couple times, who basically is a biographer. And what I felt was strange was, like, 50 years ago, I asked her the question. I said, well, when Billy was in the crafts, did they have any kind of control surfaces? And she said, no, Billy said they controlled the craft with their minds. And I find that interesting. 50 years later, Jake Barber comes out and says the same thing, that they're controlling craft with their minds. And so this would go for either one of you, but especially towards Astro. And this is a question that I've had as I've studied it and thought about it and analyzed it. Do you think that psionics is the natural evolution of remote viewing, that it's just the next phase?
No, I don't think so. And
You think they're separate things?
If you were to ask me what psionics was a year ago, before the Jake Barber Skywatcher stuff, I would have said that psionics means the genetic development of our psi, so that it's kind of like across the board as humans, that sixth sense will become an actual part of our senses. So it will be considered we have six senses, and genetically we'll be able to have an understanding about what that sense is. So what extrasensory perception actually is. So psionics is the development of that as a human. We're a psionic species. That's what I would have said a year ago. And I think what has happened is that definition has developed into more of an active use of psi to communicate or contact non-human intelligent craft or beings. And I think it's an active use of it to communicate or make contact with craft, or something of anomalous origin. And I think that the development of what remote viewing is, to me, remote viewing is in its own lane, and it's going to develop into more of like usage with like AI and social media, and more of a maybe widespread people just being able to use, like, what we were talking about with associative remote viewing. Like, imagine if you just use remote viewing to like make decisions all the time. It's kind of like using your intuition, like use your like I would much rather trust, and I do trust my intuition when I make decisions, even big decisions. I'm like, man, I resonate with this, I don't know why, just in my gut feeling. So I think that it's more of like leaning into that, of using that, kind of intuition, psychic ability to make decisions, or to use that in some sort of fashion, like like it's applicable for us some way. And I think psionics is a way to do that, or some way to measure it.
Well, I get that intuition thing. That's been something that pretty much has guided me my whole life. I think it was back in September of a year ago. I was over in Pasadena, and I was staying in this hotel, and there were two guys up on the ledge, and I just got this really bad feeling about them. I mean, they looked a little like gangbangers, but something in my gut said, you don't go in front of these guys. Go the long way around, and ended up being like 2 rooms over from them. And so first thing I did is when I got in my room, I made sure I took some precautions. But, a lot of times you don't get confirmation on that. In this case, I did. About 8 o'clock that night, I'm hearing noise outside, and I looked through the shades, and there are like 10 cop cars there. And I mean, this place is, they're all the way out on the street. This is how serious this is. And so the next morning, I went to the front desk. I said, well, you guys had a little bit of action last night. And I said, what in the world was that about? And they mentioned that they had arrested one of the guys from the room that was 2 rooms over. And so that gut instinct, I don't know if that's just a primitive instinct that we have as human beings for self-protection. Maybe, over the years with all the technology and stuff that we have, that we don't use it. We don't depend on it like maybe early man had to keep himself alive.
Such
but
an important point,
that's
Dale.
just one small example.
That's such a huge, that's one of the most important things that I have learned in all of this when it comes to telepathy and the power of the human mind. Might even be like the most important thing is that if you think about it, when we go to school and we're being raised up from childhood, when we're in class, there are no lessons on intuition. There is literally nothing that the public world does to sharpen intuition of children, right? Because that's where it would start. If you're an athlete, you're gonna start playing basketball when you're a kid, like I did, right? Or I was 12 years old. I started playing guitar. It usually starts young. You start developing the ability to do a thing, or you learn a trade, whatever it is that it's an ability that you have to basically master. There's so many different things that a human being can do, and none of that involves intuition. But what I've found is that people who are open-minded about this within their own families, when they do sharpen intuition, there is a noticeable difference. Like, this is a real thing. Like what you were just talking. So Astral had his experience. He had foresight into something awful that was going to happen. You got a gut feeling. Your story is so similar to what happened to my mom and I. My dad was in a really bad accident years ago. He almost lost his life. And we were leaving the hospital that night after, we were there visiting him. We were there with him every day. And we got to the elevators, and there was just this, like, I don't know, like 19, 20-year-old dude sitting there with headphones around his neck, just like looking at his phone, just chilling, whatever, like really unassuming. And my mom grabs me by my shirt like this, and she's like, hey, I left something in the room. We got to go back. And I'm like, okay, yeah. So we get out of like earshot of this guy, and she was like, listen, there's nothing in the room. I just got the ugliest feeling that we can't be near that guy, that we cannot go in the elevator with him. Never found out, right? Never found out. But it was enough for my mom to literally stop us in our tracks, like, hold on a second. And that's not, I've seen her do that before too. And I've gotten feelings like that.
Yeah.
It's happened to me. It happened to me at work, actually. There was a shooting on the street that we were doing a delivery on. This was in Beverly, New Jersey. And I got the feeling before there was actually any, this is what made it weird, is that I got the feeling before there was actually any physical indication that anything was about to happen. Next thing you know, because I felt like I was going to have an anxiety attack. And I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. I'm like, is my medicine not working? So, I'm pretty open about that. I'm on anxiety medication. And there were teenagers that came down the street, and they basically set up like a semicircle around the apartment building that we were in front of. And they were now this is during COVID, so they were all wearing masks, and it's just like, oh, great. I thought they were going to rob us. That's what I thought was going to happen. We're delivering a laptop. And I'm like, oh yeah, dude, they're going to totally ransack this truck. But that's not what happened. We completed the delivery, got in the truck. At this point, it was now physically obvious that something was weird. And we had to go down and turn our truck around. It was a dead end. We get off the street, we make a right, and like 7 seconds later, pop, 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 pop. pop,
Wow.
and they shot at somebody. So it's like, wow, I felt that before it happened. I know I did.
It was like precognition too as well.
100%. 100. I've told so many people about it because it's just like, it's so real. It's like, we can't. That's another thing. We can't be afraid to talk about this anymore. We need to stop shunning people.
Yeah.
Like, because even I fall victim to that sometimes, where I'm like, I don't want to make this post because it may come. No, I'm starting to get to the point now where it's just like, if I have a feeling, I'm going to talk about it, because there's a lot of other people who do too.
So Astral, what was your experience? I'm curious.
The precognitive dream.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny that you guys were talking about that because, so I was doing a lot of production in Atlanta and I recorded a lot at my apartment. And so I had a lot of artists over, and man, I'll never forget this. It was like a sequence of events that took place over a week. And in my opinion, the dude who ended up robbing me, we were recording a week earlier.
Oh,
and so there was at one point in our session in which we were recording, in which I had my back turned towards him. And I'll never forget, just like you were saying, Tom, I can't even describe the feeling. It was just like your mom was saying, like chills, dude, like something's not right. I've never had that feeling before ever. And then a week later I got robbed. And this is one of the guys that kind of knew my schedule of like what I was doing, because I was going to school too. So I basically had a dream in which I came home from school and I went into my apartment and all my stuff was gone. And at that time, my music equipment and my hard drives were it was like the most important thing to me as a music producer. Man. Like that's it. That was it, everything. So I had the dream and I woke up and I was like, man, that's a weird dream. I wasn't into the topic at all. I was like totally into music, just got done with like baseball and stuff. So like all of this stuff was like not even in my mind. So then 3 days later, I come home from school and the exact scenario takes place. I like come home, my door's propped open, exactly like my dream. I run straight into my studio. All my equipment's gone. My hard drive's gone. The only thing that was different was that I ran into my room and my backup hard drive was like stashed in my closet. Like I was like, had a backup hard drive, and they didn't find the backup hard drive. So like all my songs, like everything that I worked on for my entire life was still there. So I was like, like, thank God. But after like the whole trauma of the experience, I was like, damn, man, I had a dream about that, like the exact same thing. And that kind of like, it was paradigm shifting for me because it got me interested. And what I found was I had 2 more precognitive dreams, and both of them correlated with a very traumatic experience that I had days later. So in my opinion, because I was kind of interested in this stuff and I was paying attention to my dreams and like logging down and jotting my dreams, is I was able to kind of like get a little bit of that information through my dreams, and then realize the third time I actually felt like I changed a little bit of the outcome of the dream. So if I'll tell it real quick, I've told this story a little bit before, but I had a dream in which I have a son and we were playing out in front, and this is when he was like 6 or 7 years old. And in the dream, he's bit by something and it doesn't go, like something's not right. So I wake up and I'm like, oh man, that's not a good dream. And I was paying attention to my dream. So I was jotting all this stuff down. So I was very interested in my dreams. I had already had 2 precognitive dreams. So I'm kind of paying attention, like, like in my life about stuff that's coming up in the next couple of days. So we were out front of my house and my son's playing just in the front yard, playing around, whatever, in the yard, basketball, all that. And he yells to me, he's like, hey dad, come check out this spider. And I was like, wait a minute, instantly thought about the dream. Right. So I thought about the dream and I call him over. I'm like, hey buddy, come on over. What are you talking about? And he's like, dad, come check out this spider. And he turns around and there's a spider on his back. And I smack it off and I smash it. It was a freaking brown recluse spider.
Oh my God.
And so, yeah. And so I was like, that was crazy to me, because if I hadn't have thought of the dream, he wouldn't have come. I wouldn't have called him over and done all that, and he would have been bit by the spider, and I would have ran over to the side of my house. So I don't, that's the craziest part of the dreams that's happened to me, is basically the only way that I changed the outcome was I realized in the moment that I was having the dream. That was like, oh shit, this is what I was dreaming.
That's an important point though, Astro, because a lot of people think this is like fate. Like this is going to happen, and it
All right.
really isn't fate. It's just a possibility. You can do something to change it. And I think Lynn was talking about that on a Coast to Coast podcast recently. It's like he had a dream, he's going to get in a car wreck or something like that, or he used that illustration, one of the two. And it's like, well, what do? You don't get in a car. You can change the fate. You're not going to get in a car wreck if you're not in a car. One thing I think is really important to talk about is we're shifting now. As a nation, we're shifting as a people. We're starting to finally be open to the paranormal and stuff. We've been so preconditioned to believe it can't be true, so therefore it isn't true. And one thing that I've noticed, and I'm sure you guys as well, is the more once you start experiencing things and you're open to it, you start seeing more things. It's not that they weren't going on before. It's just you closed your mind off to them. And this is going to lead into my question, or looking for some commentary from what you guys said. Tom mentioned Paul Smith earlier, and one of the things that Paul Smith had stated is that he believed that NHI, whatever you want to call it, is suppressing, maybe using other people, ridicule, whatever, to suppress our psychic abilities because they fear what we will do with them. That supposedly, we can go farther than they can go once we develop those abilities. And since we are a violent species, that they're afraid of that. So what do you, either one of you or both of you can talk about? What are your thoughts?
Wow, that's intense, actually. Well, I'll relate it to recent events. I was in that space the other night with Sarah, UFO Sarah, and we were going over the stuff with Borland being unweaponized, the part 2. And Jay Sands came in and said some pretty heavy stuff. And I have been having conversations with people. I talk to a lot of people privately that will, just want to hear my thoughts on things, or they just, kind of want to shoot the breeze about something. But I started noticing how many people were talking to me about 2 very specific points. Point A is that our institutions are apparently heavily infiltrated by something non-human. That doesn't necessarily, I'm trying to paint the picture here, it doesn't mean that I believe that Hillary Clinton is a reptilian. That's not what I'm talking about. It's something different. Although, hey, who knows at this point, right? But then B, that they're here walking among us in some capacity. And Jay has shared things with Digby and I privately too. There's things that he's told us that I'll let him publicize them on his own because it's his business. But I always got the impression that there was some aspect of this that really, really bothered him from the NHI side. And so what I'm gathering at this point is that what you're talking about, this particular suppression, it's a hell of a lot more plausible to me at this point, because he views us currently as essentially being like enslaved by one of these groups. And like there's multiple groups with different agendas, and that's why I made this post I think it was like yesterday or the day before. I was like, how are people going to react if they find out that their religion was an experiment from somewhere else, that like it just doesn't exist, and it was just like a thing? It's like you went your whole life worshiping Allah, or giving your heart and soul to Buddha or whatever it may be. And again, I'm not honing in on any specific religion, but I have suspicions in some of these areas, quite frankly. And it's like, well, how are people going to take that if they have so much conviction in a system of faith? They go every Sunday to church or whatever it may be, and then all of a sudden they are told that it was an experiment. It wasn't anything other than that. It was just to see what we would do. It's like, oh yeah, I could see that being a problem. I could see that's one part of disclosure I could see being an issue, but it's a whole different ball game if you tell all of us that there is a group vastly more advanced than we are that essentially control this planet. That's going to bother people. That 100%, depending. Well, I mean, it's not even depending. I mean, if you look at abduction literature, we're already being poked and prodded. There's physical evidence of it all over the place. They've been messing with our genetics, and Jay was talking about that too. And Moreland, they're interested in certain families and certain bloodlines and things.
I believe that.
I think there is a strong potential for what you're talking about, that they are keeping us down to some degree. Yeah, like I know that like there's a whole community online that follows the idea of this being a prison planet, and a lot of that actually goes into like Gnosticism and archons and a lot of really creepy stuff, to be honest with you. And as time goes on, like I'm noticing more and more of that becoming more plausible, and it's even bothering me. I'm like, oh geez, yeah, this is an issue. Maybe this is what Lou was talking about when he said, the word somber.
Somber, yeah, that's what it was. Or sobering, whatever. Yeah, I was trying to remember that. Is it also possible though that because that's a definite that's a great theory and very possible, but is it also possible that they're protecting us from ourselves? Is that
in their opinion?
Yeah, and it seems like there's not a lot of thought, as far as some of the accounts anyway, where there's not a lot of compassion. You hear other stories where there are, and that's, I mean, Colaris for one, that's one that really, I mean, even Lou, I think it was said it was an outlier. And I've heard others say the same thing, but you can't just write it off. I mean, people were hurt. In some cases, people were killed. And so you have to realize that there has to be at least a part of this, that there's a dark element there and stuff. And, whether that dark element's the one in control or not, I don't know. The only question that I have is if they were completely evil and everything else, that's the one thing I don't understand. It's just my opinion, is why we're still here. If they want our planet, if they want, to control us, why don't they take the nukes off the table? Why don't they, why isn't it like, if it's a prison, why isn't it complete control on it? So I'm still trying to figure all that out. I tend to be try to be anyway, a half cup full guy. I have the glass is half full rather than half empty. But at the same time, I don't want to be the person who buries their head in the sand and ignores all the signs. And so I'm trying very, very hard to listen to both sides and be balanced. But I think most of us, if we had our wish, we would want them to be good and not bad, because if they are bad, I think what are we going to do anyway?
I think one of the surprising things that I've found in reading, one of the most interesting things that I love reading about, is people who go through remote viewing or out-of-body experiences and then encounter non-human intelligence or beings. So they're going through, these deep experiences, and then they're like, oh crap, there's like aliens over here. Like they, so it's very interesting, because I think that in some sort of way, we're able to meet them on a level playing field. So we're able to meet them at some sort of, reality existence where they're like, oh, wait a minute, like, I don't know if you should, because that's a lot of the experiences that remote viewers have, is essentially they remote view something like the moon or go to Mars, and they encounter beings, and the beings recognize them. They're like, holy cow, like, wait a minute, you're not supposed to be here. Get out of here. So I think in some of these cases, it's not necessarily that they're trying to limit us, but we might not knowingly be invading their space, be invading what they're doing. And same thing with nuclear weapons. I think that a lot of what I think of with nuclear weapons is that us testing and messing around with nuclear weapons could be messing around with a lot of their reality, could be messing around with their stuff. And so I think that humans activity that I think, in my opinion, there's maybe hundreds, thousands of entities that are interacting with Earth, not necessarily with humans, but that are maybe just observing us. And so there's a lot of different intentions and a lot of different things that are at play. Right. But I think that, for the most part, I think a lot of what's happening is just kind of observing that we're being observed. And one of the most interesting things that I've heard from a remote viewing group was that they were encountering, there was a remote viewing group that were doing a a bunch of targets. So they were testing a bunch of specific targets as a group, and they were all encountering these same beings when they were going into their meditative states. They're like, oh man, you were talking to these beings, these beings are coming, and they're like, okay, well, let's communicate with them. So they started as a group trying to communicate with these beings, and they're like, well, why are you here? Why are you on Earth? Why are you interacting with us? And what they all came back and said was like, we're observing this specific species of fireflies in Australia, and we want and they're like endangered, and we want to help them. We're here to save them. So they're like, oh, that's weird. Like, okay, well, let's help the non-human. Let's help you guys. So then they went into their next session, and they're like, well, what do you need us to do? How can we help? And they're like, you need to blow up and destroy this dam. And they're like, we can't. They're like, we can't do that. And so then then they totally cut off all communication. So then they're like, okay, you can't help us, and forget you guys.
Yeah, they're not going to do it.
So it's like it was totally, you know what I'm saying? Like some intelligences could be here totally not even caring about humans.
Right.
We're just like in the way. And then there could be others, which you're talking about, Dale, of like that are really kind of under the radar, influencing in maybe large scale ways of the direction of humanity or even individuals themselves.
Yeah. You made me think of the movie. I started watching it again the day the Earth stood still.
Oh.
The idea we're here to save the Earth from the humans. I think we can probably be better stewards of the planet. We could probably talk for another hour on this subject
right
alone, and I had some more questions, but I'm going to go ahead and transition since we're at the 52-minute mark. I also want to tell you guys, looks like we have it right now, different platforms that we're streaming live to. We're at 182 people watching right now, so that's pretty exciting as well. Let's go ahead and move on to the question about drones. What are your thoughts on this latest drone incursions over in Europe and places like that? What are your thoughts on that? Is that just Russia messing with people, or you think it's more than that?
No, it's more than that. It's way more than that. I know you guys probably saw the
mic needs to be a little up, Tom. The volume's down a little bit right now.
Oh, is it down? Okay, gotcha. Here, I'll mess with the settings while I'm doing this.
Yeah, you might want to bring it up. I think people might have a hard time hearing. I am. It just dropped way down from when you were on before.
How's it? Hold on. Is that better?
It's still a little low, but yeah, you can always speak up or move the mic a little closer if you have to, if you can't get the volume to go up.
Huh.
What do you think, Astral? I can hear you. It's not that I can't hear you. It's that are you noticing that too, Astral? The volume's just a little bit on the low side.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Astral, and I'll mess with this for a sec.
No doubt. Well, yeah. Well, I think the drones to me, now that it's kind of like a resurgence of the drones are happening. Mm-hmm. I think the interest has kind of come up because of what's happening overseas, and that it's similar to the events that have occurred in Jersey. I think the Jersey thing was the interesting part to me was that it occurred over such a long period of time. It was like months that this was happening and people weren't able to figure it out. I'm not sure of this latest kind of these latest events that are happening over Sweden and over near the UK are going to be able to take place at that length of time, because I think there's going to be more investigation into it. I think people were really frustrated as to the explanation. One of the things that Ross Coulthart, like I felt like he became like so focused on the drones, rightfully so, because there was never a real explanation about it. And there never was like a clear, kind of way forward for us to figure any of it out. There were so many people who were chiming in that even generals were coming in and they're like, we didn't really know anything. We couldn't figure anything out. So that to me, it signals really, it's scary. It's kind of worrisome to me as even an American. And I think one of the things when we talk about the threat narrative, right? Like this narrative, to me, the threat narrative doesn't mean that the aliens are negative and they're trying to come and get us and take us out. It means that we don't have, as America and other countries, we don't have control over our skies, and we don't fully know what's going on. And that in itself is a huge threat to me.
Right.
And so when this stuff is happening, it's just like, it makes you kind of step back and be like, wait a minute, man, like, we don't know what's going on. I feel like as much as we spend on all of this stuff, we should at least have an explanation for the American people that kind of gets them easy about this situation. And that just, to me, and now it's happening again. So it's kind of like, uh-oh, you know what, here we go again. So it just kind of makes me think about that the lack of control in which we don't think we have about our skies.
That really feeds into the next question. It'll take me a second to kind of put it all together, so bear with me on this. I think the question is it all drones? I mean, I think honestly there are at least 3 possibilities, probably more, but drones is one. Radar detection or spoofing, which is another thing that's being thrown out there. And then of course the third option is anomalous objects. In cases where people actually see these things with their own eyes, or if it's caught on camera, I think that at least in some of the cases that would do away with the spoofing explanation. With the volume of drones that are being built, you know, in the private and the commercial and for military applications, I think we would have to say that it's guaranteed that probably many, if not most of these probably are drones of some form. But then the third one is UAP. And I think the reason that we shouldn't just dismiss it is because these UAPs, UFOs, whatever you want to label them, NHI, they've been around longer than drones have. Mm-hmm. And I think it would be a mistake to look and say, well, it's all drones, because that would mean that the UAPs just all of a sudden disappeared because the drones were there. And I don't think that's happened. And so I think the most likely conclusion is that, what do you guys think? Most of them, there are a lot of drones out there, and you know, I think, what's the statistic? 95% of what people see are misidentification, but it's the 5% that we're interested in. So you think that same principle maybe applies with the drones?
I'll tell you what's going on down here on the ground. I'm just talking to regular people, just regular everyday people, and even specifically individuals that do not care about this subject. They're like not even into science fiction. They don't, you know, they have their own interests, whether it's golf or something else, and they are seeing things that they cannot explain. I mean, I'm still getting reports. I'm still talking to people here in southern New Jersey about this, multiple towns. Yes, like I said in my video the other day, certainly some people are seeing drones, like actual man-made drones. Yes. Now, obviously, even the anomalous objects aside, all of a sudden people were just bang out of nowhere last year. They were seeing, because we saw photos of them, we saw videos of them, they saw drones. Like, what I think was going on, just based on everything that I've looked at, and Digby came to the same conclusion too. Russ Coulter, I think, was on board with this. Steve Bassett, a bunch of guys thought the same thing. Darcy, even. There was a massive uptick in sightings of anomalous objects. And since they don't control the skies, as Astral said, and they're having a tough time admitting that, they sent up a bunch of drones to muddy the water. But at the same time, they were able to observe whatever it was that was going on. Now, again, if this was just regular old, oh, hey, we're running we're doing a test operation on this fleet, like, we would have had those answers by now. There are multiple agencies that are not only gaslighting the public, but they're gaslighting each other. So why would that be going on? That's bizarre in of itself. And I will also remind people that want to bring the whole China-Russia thing into this. In the modern era, you could make that argument for certain things, absolutely. But drones, China, Russia, it's all being used as like a blanket excuse for things that we have been seeing since antiquity. Like, this has been going on for millennia. It's in the Bible. Ezekiel. Yeah. I'm sure, Dale, you're probably very familiar with that.
Yeah, Elijah,
This is,
right.
This has
like
been with us for forever.
well,
But now that we have drones, it's like they have now found a new diversion tactic. They've found a new name that they can call it by.
that
and
was a question.
That's it. That's what they're doing, in my opinion. And based on the people that I've been talking to, just regular people in real life, they are hiding something. I don't know what it is, but they are absolutely gaslighting the public. They're lying, straight up lying about it. I know they are. I've talked to people that have seen. I talked to a woman very specifically who was in the Air Force, who's able to very specifically tell you, oh, hey, that bright light you're looking at, when it turns, you're going to notice that it's now a helicopter. Or, oh, hey, that's a plane. It's got its landing gear out. She told me that she literally watched a metamorphosis occur right in front of her eyes, and the object wasn't turning, and it was moving by like this, like at this rate of speed. So it was going like 10 miles per hour in the air, and then it literally transformed into another object. And to be fair, I didn't initially believe those types of reports. I was like, oh, they're probably seeing things at certain angles. But then they just kept piling up. Red Panda Koala was putting out a bunch of those videos and those reports too, like just boom, right after the other, boom, boom, boom. And I'm like, okay, people really are seeing this. And then they told me to my face, like, this is a cover up of something. I know it is now. There's too much.
That was definitely, you just, answered my question very beautifully. And that is the fact, is the term drones the new swamp gas?
Yes.
And because it's what it is. It's a way to basically excuse away NHI, because they can say, well, you know what? There's a bunch of drones out there. And so it's just drones. And so, and I love what you said, because I'd heard that myself, that maybe some of this is they are flooding it with drones to muddy the water, to make it like, we'll say, so I have a ready-made excuse for why it's not NHI. And we know that there are, contractors out there that are working on this, and they really want this to go away. The bad news for them is it's not going away. But my question I was going to add, that the last one is, wouldn't it be better? And, we already know that UAP, NHI, whatever you want to call it, we already know that their tech is way more superior than ours is. It's much more advanced than what ours is. Isn't it scarier to think of if Russia or China has made that leap? Then aren't we at a huge disadvantage? Wouldn't it be better to have it set with somebody that we already knows, in front of us? They haven't destroyed us, they haven't conquered us, maybe suppressed us, but they haven't exactly come over. Now, if Russia or China has this tech, isn't that a pretty scary scenario?
Terribly scary. But they do. I think they, to some degree, just like us, though. And I think that's possibly now probably being lumped into the mutually assured destruction situation. It's like, okay, well, all these different countries, they all have nukes. Now maybe some of them have like minor anti-gravitics, etc. It doesn't really change anything until one of the countries masters something. And based on the things we've been hearing lately, it sounds like the main prize is the power source. That's like the biggest deal, because if you think about it,
that's what
if you're able to send things out that don't have to refuel, that's terrifying, because then that it can hover and linger and harass as long as it wants, and it doesn't have to go anywhere to gas up. And that is very frightening to think about. And it sucks that this is all, it always goes back to war. And that's just one of those things that just literally, as I get older, I get even more frustrated about it, is that like all of these different areas of science that have probably been withheld from us, like we're in like a new dark age for some of these things. And I mean, my God, there was like over 200 years of history that were basically scrapped because the church didn't like what people were thinking about, right? With the Crusades and everything back in the day. But now they have the ability to make entire areas of science just vanish. How that is done, I have ideas for that, but it's God knows where we would be and what we would all have and how the world would function if we actually had the ability to share these things with one another without having to worry about somebody blowing somebody up.
Right.
Like, we're the problem, technically. I hate to say it, but
Well, I think that's what was so chilling about what Ross Coulthart said with the Tic Tac being Lockheed Martin and Burleson as well, is that if we had this technology back in 2000s, right, and we had private companies develop something like this, what does it look like nowadays? And but I had a question for you guys, is because I feel like the UAP topic is sort of latching onto the drone, this drone, and I wonder if, do you guys feel like it's conflating? It's going to be tougher to distinguish anomalous phenomenon from drones, and that it's kind of going to be jumbled together? Or do you think it's a good thing to kind of get onto it because the drones are, gaining a lot of attention and momentum in the topic?
I think you're the first point. I think it's conflating it, and I think it's actually going to be a bad thing in the long run, because as I mentioned before, everybody's going to naturally assume, and anytime you try to talk about the anomalous characteristics of what's up in the air, the first thing Mick West and others are going to say, their go-to argument is, "Oh no, that's just a drone."
Right.
I mean, it's an easy out now, and so I think it's going to make it harder to be able to get people to take it seriously that there are anomalous objects in the air, because now, I mean, that's better than swamp gas. I mean, if you think about it, it's a lot better than swamp gas.
way better than swamp gas.
So
way
I don't know
better
what
than
Tom
Venus.
thinks about it. I think it's worse. I think it's.
I'm
really
with
is.
you. I have to be honest. I'm with you. I think it might sound like a kind of a dumb answer, but I want to say half and half, depending on who you're talking to. I think it'll be different based on like the groups that everybody is now falling into, especially like online. But I think overall it's a negative, because anytime anything anomalous is going over an airport now, they're calling it a drone. I'm noticing this. They're calling it a drone before they know it's a drone. They're calling it that name, that word, before they've really identified any other characteristics outside of A, it's self-illuminated, and B, it's flying. But there have also been some retractions too, where they're like, you know what, we called it a drone, but we can't call it that right now. So that's a step in the right direction. But it's teetering back and forth, and I think, I think in the long run, it'll eventually taper off and won't be an issue. But for the time being, I think it's going to be like what you're saying, Dale. I think it's going to be a negative technically for regular average people that don't look into this subject at all. But for us, I think it's a good identifier as to when, people are feeding us a bunch of nonsense. I think that's the good thing here, is like, if that's the blanket term you're using, that automatically is going to tell me, maybe a little something that you don't want to talk about, because you're immediately going to drone when you have no idea what it actually is. That's going to be a telltale sign in certain situations, I think.
Did you want to talk about the tech right now, that the stuff you've been working on? I know you're kind of chomping at the bit for that. I'd love to let the audience hear some of your thoughts about the tech of some of the possible tech of some of these craft.
Well, there's a lot of patterns that you'll find in UFO literature, for a lot of different things. So one of the things that I've always been like really obsessed with is the idea of like, what would it really be like to like walk into a legitimate craft? You think about Bob Lazar, and that's probably like the most well-known example. But from actual like contact cases, there's a lot of characteristics that so many people have described like across the board, where I find it very odd that they would all come up with the same traits like over and over and over. And I don't even, it's funny because it doesn't actually sound like what a person might make up in their own mind. Like if we go and we watch science fiction movies, like when you're inside of an alien craft, there tends to be a lot of weird noises going on, or like the lighting's weird, and then there's always a ton of buttons. There's always like switches and switches and switches. There's switches all over the chairs, all like to the point where it's just like, oh my God, what is all of this? But in actuality, the pattern that I'm finding across a lot of different encounter stories and a lot of even testimony from people that claim to have, like worked at S4 and things of that nature, is that there's a lot of minimalism across the board on the interiors of the craft. Like there's seamless surfaces. There's no fasteners. There's no joints. A lot of times there's like no right angles. And it's funny because Bob Lazar had always said that it looked like everything was molded from like the same piece of wax. Now, Joe McGonigal, that presentation clip that I shared, he specifically said that they're grown like crystals. And then it dawned on me. And I thought to myself, okay, a lot of people get the feeling that the craft is alive when they're near it. Like there's this weird sensation that people experience where they feel like the craft is like a living creature of some kind. And I thought to myself, I'm like, no, it's not a living creature. It feels that way probably because there is some sort of neurological connection between the beings, the pilots, and the ship, and that's what's causing that. It's amplified, and if they're being grown like crystals, I'm like, maybe it's not a nuts and bolts process. Maybe it's like when we go and grow tissue samples. Maybe it's more of like a biological situation where they go down to the molecule, the atom, and they're actually able to create something out of an organic composite material, and it has like a nervous system that you're able to like hook into. I know it sounds like super crazy, but it actually makes sense, right? Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, some of what you're describing is the connection, at least, and maybe not the technology itself.
Like it has nerves or something that you're able to like plug yourself into, as opposed to like computer wiring. It's like the organic version of that, essentially. But yeah, that's what I think. I think that these machines are genuinely way more advanced than people even give them credit for, and they obviously have some sort of ability to be material and immaterial at the same time. How that works is, beyond me. But they're and again, McGonigal, man, right on the money. Like I always said, maybe it's not anti-gravity. Maybe it's just anti-inertia, like just an inertial dampening field. Because right then and there, like if I was wearing an inertial dampening field, I could like walk forward and lean forward, and I would just keep leaning. Like I just keep going until something kind of pushes me in the other direction. You could just click, and it's almost like infinite speed. Like there's nothing in your way at that point. There's nothing that inertia. There's nothing that can stop you except for yourself. It's very bizarre to think about, but I think that's what some of these craft are actually doing, is that they're just dampening inertia, and then they're able to basically set themselves into motion and stay in motion. It's really wild, and it would be nuts to be inside of one of those things, because it would probably be a very relaxing atmosphere while you look outside and everything's blowing past you like that, and you wouldn't feel a damn thing, because you're not succumbing to any of the forces of the earth at that point. You're totally exempt from it, which is wild.
What do you think about the pods that he was sleeping pods, or rejuvenation pods? What did you think about his comments on that? Because isn't that what it was? Joe McMoneagle that was asked to remote view, I think, Mars, like million years BC or something like that. I can't remember the exact time frame, but he had to go way back a million years, and he saw the pyramid, and he saw what was like remote viewed, what looked like survival pods and stuff. So what were your thoughts on that? Are these ships are equipped with these kinds of things, and these beings are either sleeping in those things or rejuvenating their bodies? I don't know how long takes to get her. Maybe they were using portholes. Maybe they're bending space and time. But I did find that one, of all the things I probably heard in remote viewing, that's one of the ones that really intrigues me.
I think it was like a habitat, like maybe some sort of suspended animation. Like if they were, because the impression that I got from his reading of that entire thing was that they were trying to survive as long as possible, because I think they might have been sort of like waiting for an arc, to come pick them up or something like that. So in fear of them possibly missing out on that and everybody dying off, I think those pods were probably like stasis pods, where it's like, okay, I'm going to be out and about. We're going to see what's going on out here. I'm going to go back into the pod, set it and forget it. And it's going to slow down their biological processes and essentially prevent them from aging. Or maybe not fully, but slow it down enough that maybe if they had like a lifespan of, say, like 120 years, just to throw a random number out there, maybe this would increase it to like 300 or 400 even. It was something of that. And the pyramid thing too. All you have to do is go look at satellite images of Mars. There are definitely pyramids on Mars. Like it is so, it's blatant. Like it's really obvious. It's mind-blowing. It's like, well, where do those come from? They stick out compared to everything else around them. There's all these weird straight angles. They're even arranged. Some of them even have, I think they even line, the ones at Sidonia, they literally line up with ours, like in some way. I know.
Isn't the one really a lot bigger though?
Yeah, well, there's one that's enormous. Like, yeah, it's like 3,000 meters tall or whatever it is. And if you compare those satellite images to the images that we could take from orbit of our pyramids on Earth, it looks exactly like you would expect, just way more eroded. Like they just look super old. Well, and we know it had an atmosphere. We know Mars had flowing water. Right. I would even go as far as saying that there's a good chance that at one point in history, Venus may have even been a similar situation. Nobody ever talks about Venus, and yet Venus is closer in size to Earth. It's just we all assume like, oh, look at it, it's like a ball of acid, so there's nothing to see here. You sure about that? Because I'm thinking that there was probably something going on there a long time ago. Like maybe, again, maybe we're descendants from some of these planets. And I thought about that. You remember when Lou was talking about, he made some very interesting comments, specific allusions to people learning about what it really means to be human. It's like, maybe there are more humans out in the universe, and maybe these encounters with like Nordics and things of that nature, like those are like relatives from other parts of the galaxy and the universe. And I saw an article. There was a gentleman on Joe Rogan's podcast saying that they're going to make a discovery on the moon that will prove that there were like humans in prehistory that had like set up base camp on the moon. Did you guys catch that?
No, I hadn't heard that one. Oh,
yeah. Wow. So I think I have it right here. You guys would recognize him by his face. Okay, so yeah, here it is. So Joe Rogan had on a gentleman. Yes, allow ads. My God. Okay. He's oh God, what the heck is his name? Pause. There we go. Okay, my ad blocker. So this was from this week. I'm fairly certain. But Joe Rogan claims ancient Egyptians fled to the moon and the whole timeline of humanity is wrong. So that's a really terrible title for this article, because I don't think Joe Rogan was claiming anything, to be honest. This gentleman has been on Gaia before, I'm pretty sure. What the heck is his name? I'll find it here. But what he was saying was that there's a mission coming up. China, I think it's called the Chiang 7, I believe. And I think it's next year. They're going to be sending this reconnaissance mission, a lander, I believe, to the moon. And apparently there's no stopping this, or whatever the situation is, that they are going to come across what is clear evidence that there's ancient remains on the moon. But the gentleman didn't say non-human intelligence. He was specifically saying that it had something to do with humans, which I found very odd. Like, how? But I think he said that that we would recognize specific languages on some of this stuff. And again, I don't know how he knows that. I'm not really sure where he got that information from, but apparently he said it on Rogan, and it seemed very like ultra confident about it, which is kind of strange. It's like, well, how did you how did you come up with that, man? Like, okay, interesting coincidence between a planned live streaming of China's moon expedition, and also this relates to Chris Bledsoe. So the gentleman's name is Greg Braden, and he claims there was an ancient human civilization that in some capacity was existing on the moon at one point. He told Rogan that the Cold War discoveries of this lost civilization were suppressed by a deliberate pact between Washington and Moscow, an understanding between the U.S. and the Soviet Union not to release what was found on the lunar surface. That's believable. He said this agreement was motivated by fear of public reaction during a period of global tension and nuclear threat. He said China was never part of that secrecy pact and could now expose what the earlier superpowers concealed. This Chang 7 mission, sent for launch next year, will stream live footage from its lunar lander and rover, and he said this could lead to a historic, uncontrolled disclosure, as China has publicly stated it will televise its findings to the world. And then this also relates to Chris Bledsoe, who said when the star Regulus is in the gaze of the Sphinx before sunrise, there will be a shift in the knowledge of humanity, and apparently they've been doing people have been doing a ton of research on these dates and all of these things, and apparently it actually lines up with when this rover is going to be landing on the moon, which is weird. But I digress. I don't know. We'll find out.
Well, you answered my biggest question when I heard it. My biggest question is, don't they already know some of this stuff? Haven't they suppressed all that? But how can we expect them to release it? But you just answered it. The idea that China, of course, they want to be the ones to get out there and be in front and be in the lead on this. But I really hope that happens. I really hope, because I think there's a lot of stuff they already know that they don't think we can handle. And my question is, when are they ever going to get to the point that they think as a species that we can handle it? Because I know there's a lot of talk about the church, that the church is going to fall apart, it's going to collapse, but I don't think that's going to be true. You guys know I'm a pastor and I'm into this stuff. It didn't destroy my faith. It changed my faith. It changed the way I look at things. I'm more open to other possibilities than I was before. And even, there is a passage in the Bible that says that the sun stood still. And that's why when Galileo looked at and realized that, or that the earth stood still, that the sun was the center of our solar system and re-rotated around it, that was something that, the church leaders that threatened to kill him, they put him on house arrest. And it was a big deal, because it was definitely something that the Bible basically, stated it wrong. And my argument is, well, the person described it by their observation, and that's how it appeared. But that's the reason, though. I don't think, faith will probably change. It'll be morphed into looking something different than what we have today. But the church did adapt to that. That was a big, big issue. And so, but here's my thing about disclosure, big D, whatever you want to call it, disclosure, is I think even people like you and me, like all of us here right now, I think when actually disclosure comes, I think it'll be kind of a little bit earth-shattering for us, because it's one thing to theorize, and some of us have experienced it, but it's another thing when it becomes a reality for everyone. Have you thought about it? And we know that they're among us. Bigelow has said that. It's like, what are you going to do when you go to the grocery store and say that there's not no longer disguised or whatever, but there's a group of aliens in the store, or NHI, whatever you want to call them, and they're in our society. We tend to segment, we don't tend, we got all these different Chinatown and Germantown and stuff like that. So what in the world are things going to look like when disclosure gets here and open contact is there and they actually come and intermix with us? That's the one that really has me fascinated and going, are we truly ready for that? I think it's easy to say it, but I don't know what the answer is to that. I don't know what you guys think on that.
Want to take that one, Astral?
Yeah. I can't, I guess, see the intermixing of that happening in terms of the disclosure of what I've come to learn as or know as disclosure. And even to me, of disclosure, I just don't see there being an announcement which would change people's lives enough to care that it would alter it at all, unless the phenomenon itself made itself known. To me, that would be the only way that people would actually change things. Even if like the president came on and was like, Roswell's real, we've been dealing, we're even actively dealing with non-human intelligence. I just think there's so much going on with people that unless it's like, actively happening, like the phenomenon is actively, because here's one thing that I've noticed, even with like David Grush. So David Grush came out, and the biggest event in ufology in decades, what I would say, is when Grush came out.
Yeah.
And then next week, there was a little bit of coverage, but I think mainstream media, not much. The next week, there was like the Las Vegas thing where there was supposedly this alien that came down and was like running around or whatever. That got so much more coverage. And to me, it was because it was actively happening and the public can partake in it.
Right.
The virality of it. People were like, oh, this is like something that's happening right now. So all of this stuff that we're confirming in terms of disclosure that we think is like, oh, we're going to get evidence of Roswell. We're going to get evidence of the Nimitz. We're going to get all this and we're going to reveal it to the public. I just don't think the public's going to care. I think that what's really going to get the public be like to be interested. And if the phenomenon is actively engaging with us, if there's like something that they're like, oh shit, like, did you see this? Or you see, like they're here, they're dealing with like something's going on. And so that to me is the disclosure, less about like the government telling us what's going on and more of like, we figure out what this phenomenon is. Not necessarily contact, but like we kind of figure it out. We're like, oh, like we're engaging. I think I think disclosure and the discovery of non-human intelligence are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yep.
Go ahead, Tom.
I think Astral, I think you're on the money there. And there's like there's so many different versions of this in different phases that could happen. There would be a very big difference between a talking head coming out and making some type of announcement versus, like he said, an active participation. Let's say a fleet shows up. Right. Look at the way people are reacting to Atlas. Which I thought it was a comet. But now as time's going on, and it's just like, it doesn't even seem like astronomers actually know if it's a damn comet or not. Like, I don't know what the hell is going on with that. I have no idea. I'm not a scientist or an astronomer. So I'll wait until the data comes out and I can make that determination on my own. But because that is actively moving through the solar system, and you can like check on the news regarding it, there's more. I guess it's almost like more exciting, like generally, right? Like if they just come out and say, yes, Roswell happened, a lot of people I think are just going to be like, yeah, we thought so. You're liars. You've just confirmed everything that we know. That's really cool, though. It's vindicating. And it also depends on which groups of people you're talking about. The people that like myself, like an experiencer, that'd be incredibly vindicating and quite emotional, honestly, because it's just like, finally. That's like the biggest thing, is that there was an admittance finally, and it also serves to maybe potentially improve the relationship between society and governance. Like, it'd be nice to be on the same page with our government. It would be nice to respect our leaders, so to speak, our politicians and such. It would feel good to be proud of those people working for us, because that is not where we're at right now. And this is a subject that could potentially change that. So if you have something that arrives or shows up and it's visible, that's a big deal. That's like big time. If you admit what you were lying about, that is also big. But I think it will die down maybe not as quickly as other things, because it would be like the announcement of all announcements. But then more questions would begin. Who has been killed to conceal this? What else are you lying about? Do you know of anything that's coming in the future? So whatever version of this that we get, that's how we're going to that's how we're going to basically frame our reaction to it. It's like, if you have version A, B, or C, you will have reaction A, B, and C. It's just all going to depend on how it goes. And I think the goal from the people who want it out is to do it slowly and in phases, just like being out in the summer and going into a very cold pool of water. Instead of diving right in and it's a shock to the system, you go in little by little and you get used to the water. And personally, I think that might actually be the safest and most respectable way of going about this, instead of just dropping everything on everybody, because people like us want the everything and feel like we can handle all of that. But then there are the things that we don't know, that we might not be prepared for them because it's something we haven't thought of. And then there's regular people who might have a tough time even dealing with the fact that it's going to rain tomorrow. And now you're going to tell them that they were created by extraterrestrials. Like, so I think they're just trying to play it safe. And I respect that, like, you gotta be fair here. Like, some people, it might scare them a little bit.
They're worried about the weather, and you're like, oh, by the way, aliens are real, and they've been interacting with us forever.
Like, I can picture, like, my aunt, she watches like all my podcasts and she loves all of it, but it still creeps her out. And it creeps my mom out too. Like, the idea that we're like not the top of the food chain and all of that. So I think they would probably have a moment of like pacing back and forth in the kitchen, and then they would probably have to come to me and be like, what do I do? And be like, all right, sit down.
I think you Astral made a really good point earlier as well. And it seems like with society the way it is, and it's probably because of social media, it's probably because we got, everything's live right now, that if it was 2 weeks ago, it's yesterday's news and people don't really care about it. It's like, look at podcasts. You can put a podcast out, and when it's fresh and everything, people are jumping all over it.
Right.
But you wait 2 weeks, you wait 3 weeks, and the numbers just drop way off because, well, that's yesterday's news and stuff. And, I think a lot of us are just wired that we want something new. We want something fresh. We want something that's right here, right now. And so what you said, Astro, makes a lot of sense. I've got like one more question. We're kind of at that period where we should start thinking about closing down. But let's just go back to drones for a minute. When drones first came out, they were like recreational vehicles. And, they were just toys. That's all they were. And now all of a sudden, in the last decade or two, they've been weaponized. I mean, look at all the different places they're being used at. You got them in Russia and Ukraine. You got the Houthis using them. You got Iran and Israel using them. You've got tons of countries now using them. Now, of course, we were the leaders in that. We were one of the first ones with the Reaper drones and stuff like that. We used them over in Iraq and we used that. But with AI coming into the picture and the autonomous abilities to hunt and kill, that's a pretty scary concept. I mean, how are we ever going to be safe, as this technology, especially with AI? I mean, if you're living in a certain country, you may be in somebody wants you dead. I mean, they can be surveilling you, and in just a heartbeat, you can be dead. So, what are your guys' thoughts? Are you worried about AI getting involved with the drones and being autonomous?
Yes, definitely worried. worried, but it goes beyond drones. It goes
Okay.
way beyond drones. And it's like, what will protect us? Probably more AI, to be honest with you. I don't think people
Right.
realize what's coming when it comes to that. They don't, because the one thing that they're not thinking about is that we are right on the cusp of the quantum computing evolution, where bits and bytes become qubits, and it's going to change the ball game, the decision making power, and how fast an advanced version of a Reaper drone installed with quantum computing and AI. I mean, let's say it has 100,000 different decisions to choose from, but it only has 5 milliseconds to choose that and come up with the right one, and hit the butt hair on a horse or so, you know what I mean? Like something super, super accurate. It's going to do it, and it's going to do it with flying colors. You're a violent machine that will have killing power like you have never seen before, as far as precision and being able to decide. It's going to know your next move before you know your next move, and chances are you will already be dead at that point. So the only way to combat it is going to be better AI. AI is going to take over this planet in a lot of different ways, maybe not Terminator style per se, but it's going to drastically change what this world looks like over the next 5 to 10 years. It is going to get crazy. And a lot of scientists and physicists even think that we're within 3 years before we break out AGI. And you combine AGI with quantum computing, and now you're starting to get into the territory of something that thinks a hell of a lot more like a person. And then you have to start wondering, is this a life form now? These things are coming, and I don't think people realize how fast they are, and it's going to happen in a blink of an eye, and they're not going to know what to do about it because it's so powerful. And yes, you have to be careful. If this stuff gets into the wrong hands, I couldn't even imagine like a James Bond villain that has their hands on this stuff before like other people do, and what they would be able to do with it. They would be able to hack into anything, because quantum computers can. There are passwords that are like that, the encryption that's been developed where none of our computers can actually crack them. They're designed that way. A quantum computer would be able to crack a password that would take a regular computer like 1,000 years to crack. Like that. It is that different. That people need to really understand how drastically different this is, and that it's going to set the world on fire, technologically speaking. And sometimes I wonder if the NHI have been pushing us in the direction to create this, because it might even end up being useful to them at some point. It's really powerful. Like, powerful isn't even the right word.
Do you think this is all connected? The fact that there seems to be more awareness now, it's not taboo. Is this a process that maybe they are working out, and the technology and all of this is all coming together at the same time to do that? I'm curious in your thoughts on that.
Yes, I think it's connected. I'm still trying to work out specifically how it's connected. Doing a lot of reading on that. It really started with Nigel Kerner's books, Song of the Greys, and then his other books that came out. He had one that he was working on when he died, unfortunately, and a lot of my research is heavily influenced by him, on the Greys specifically. But it's almost like I'm wondering if they're almost like cosmic gardeners of consciousness almost. And it's like, okay, here's an experiment, you create life. Well, now let's see if that life can create life, and so on and so forth. It's like a pretty beautiful, tremendous, and like almost mystical cycle to watch. So, but I think there is some type of connection there. One of the, I guess, more negative theories is that we are slowly building an infrastructure for them and don't know it. And once it's ready, we will know it. So
So that could
Hard to
explain
say.
if they were hostile while they're delaying, they're just letting us do all the work and all the preparation for them.
That's the theory. Yep.
That's an interesting one. Well, just real quick, getting back to the AI problem. You know, I know people don't like the word morality because one person's morality is not another person's, but don't you think that there needs to be something built in to AI to have some sense of right and wrong? And so I hope that they're doing that. I hope they're starting that as a base thing right now, because otherwise these things can be just killing machines without any remorse at all. So, but the other thing I liked about that you said about AI, which I thought was good, is that not only can it be the villain, but it can also potentially be the hero. I hate it when I hear people get all religious and they call AI the Antichrist and whatever. It's like, because I'm not a religious person. You guys have to understand that. I'm a person of faith and stuff. But you know, so I love that you mentioned that maybe the solution is AI as well. Just making better AI.
Yeah, just maybe more moral AI. And I just from what I know of all of this, it seems like a lot of the development that's going on, I think they are trying to instill that. And, you know, you also have, I mean, the laws of robotics have been around, you know, longer than any of us have even been alive at this point. So I think those were written out before we had built anything resembling AI. So, yeah, I mean, again, there are two very distinct paths forward with this technology. One is good and one is bad. It's really simple. And it's really, I think, going to just kind of come down to us. It's like, well, which one do we want? Do we want the utopian version or do we want the Terminator version? And I think people are going to go for the former, right? Like, that's what we want. We want life to be easier. The whole point of AI and robotics at its core is automation. And the whole point of automation, technically, until corporations and, you know, stockholders started coming in and putting their greedy friggin' hands all over everything. The whole point of automation is to do more of our work so that we have more time to be more creative and artistic, actually. Like, that's the whole point of it, is like, instead of me getting up tomorrow like I'm going to have to and go deliver this damn furniture in Trenton in some stinky house that I never want to go in again, we can send out robots to go do that. And instead, I could be at home painting a picture of a hummingbird or something, right? Like, that's what it was supposed to be for. But now they're starting to take advantage of it. So it reminds me of
like the internet, when the internet was first, you know, born. You know, and everybody's like, oh, we can't get people access to the internet. People, you know, it's kind of like that, where everybody's going to use AI for their own specific. Like, will it turn into Tony Stark of like developing like Iron Man suits with AI? You know, somebody's probably going to do it. You know, I think there's going to be people that are going to use AI to do some pretty crazy things. Incredible.
Like a Lockheed Martin type of deal, but kind of like a rogue Lockheed Martin.
Right.
The guy's got a lot of money.
But I think, you know, combining quantum computers with AI, and, you know, we're getting into some things that we might not necessarily have control over. You know, it's essentially creating consciousness itself, and something that could have thought in its own and act upon itself. And I think that's the kind of fear, is that we develop something that starts to act on its own and is able to do things, you know, in a larger scale that we might not be able to have control over right now. And I think that's the kind of fear, is like, do we want to open up? And I think early on, I forgot who said this, but like, somebody was like, all right, the two things that we can't let AI do is access the internet and code itself. And so it's already done those two.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, we've already opened up Pandora's box a little bit. So yeah.
Well, you guys, I hate to cut it off. The longer we go, our numbers keep going up. 252 live viewers watching us right now.
Oh, sweet.
But
that's
yeah,
awesome.
So we've done really, really well.
Cheers.
I'm telling you what, not only are you guys great friends, but you're great guests. I mean, this has been one heck of a podcast, and you both brought something to the table. And like I said, you crossed over on the other ones, maybe expertise, but I want to thank you. This was a really, really good podcast, and the numbers show that. And so I'm so glad that we got together and we were able to do this. I'm going to go ahead and pull you guys out, and I'm going to do my closing and talk for a couple minutes afterwards, if that's okay.
Thanks, Dale.
Well, to everyone that's been watching this live feed, I didn't mention this in the beginning, but if you enjoyed this podcast, I know I sure enjoyed hosting it, and I enjoyed our guest. I'd really ask you to go ahead and subscribe to the channel. You can help me out a lot by sharing the video. Also, you hit that bell. That way, you'll get a notification of all the upcoming podcasts. I've got a Chinese man by the name of Samuel Chong coming on. He's going to talk about what's going on in the UAP world in China. So I'm really, really excited about that. So there's going to be a lot of great podcasts coming up. And so if you want to be a part of that, hit that bell so you have that as well. I want to thank you for being here and being a part of what we're doing. This is really an exciting podcast today, an exciting day. As far as I'm concerned, to be a human being, we're living in, the world changes every day. And I just can't wait to see what's happening next. Anyway, thank you for being here, and God bless.